I had everything a man could want: a successful business, a beautiful home nestled in a pristine neighborhood, and a wife who seemed like a living embodiment of my dreams. Cassandra was my partner in every sense of the word. Together, we built a life from the ground up, one that we were both proud of and that others admired. We weren't just living the American dream, we were redefining it. Cassandra had always been extraordinary. I remember the first time I saw her at a conference in New York. She commanded the room without even trying, her words crisp, her smile magnetic. She had that rare kind of energy that made you believe she could move mountains if she set her mind to it. I wasn't the only one drawn to her that day, but by some miracle, she chose me. We quickly became inseparable. Our relationship was a fusion of shared dreams, mutual respect, and boundless ambition. Cassandra was the one who pushed me when I felt like settling, the one who saw greatness in me before I could see it myself. Every milestone I achieved, every success I tasted, I owed so much of it to her. She was my rock, my muse, my best friend. Our life together was like a finely tuned machine, each piece fitting perfectly. She'd come home from work late, often exhausted but exhilarated, and we'd sit down, maybe pour a glass of wine, and talk about our plans. She'd share stories from her day, her latest victory at work, a bold idea she'd pitched, or the details of a project that had her up late at night. It was inspiring, honestly, watching her thrive in a world where the stakes were high and only the best could keep up. And she wasn't just keeping up, she was leading the way. I knew I was lucky. Every time I looked at her, I felt that surge of pride and love that reminded me how far we'd come together. People would often comment on how well we balanced each other out. I was the strategist, steady and measured, while Cassandra was the spark, the visionary with an appetite for risk and excitement. We were a team, not just in marriage but in life, each pushing the other to aim higher. Our friends admired what we had, often telling us how rare it was to see two people so in sync. Cassandra and I had a rhythm, a chemistry that felt unbreakable. The world around us could fall apart, and I'd still feel invincible as long as I had her by my side. But as much as we had each other, Cassandra's drive and ambition had a way of taking her into new circles, worlds filled with influential people, high-stakes deals, and visions for a future even bigger than ours. And I was proud, genuinely proud, to see her shine. She was fearless, unapologetically bold, and unstoppable in her pursuits. Together, we seemed like the kind of couple that nothing could touch. I believed in that with every fiber of my being, and I was ready to build our future on that belief, convinced that our shared dreams would carry us through anything. Cassandra's world was fast-paced, a relentless whirlwind of meetings, deals, and decisions. And I loved that about her. I loved that she could be in control, that she had this fierce energy that few people could keep up with. But somewhere along the line, her world became even faster, almost out of reach. She'd been working late more often, taking on new projects that seemed to demand more of her time. I would get home from a long day and find the house empty, a note on the counter saying she'd be late or a quick message on my phone telling me not to wait up. I'd eat dinner alone, the food turning cold as I watched the clock and thought about how driven she was, how much she gave to her work. It made me proud, sure, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't make me feel just a little left behind. When she did come home, she'd be exhausted. Her eyes would look past me, her mind clearly somewhere else, even as she went through the motions of asking about my day. I tried to pull her into our old conversations, asking about the clients she worked with, about her projects, but her responses grew shorter, vaguer. It was like she was guarding something, keeping it just out of my reach. One evening, I waited up for her. Midnight came and went, and the house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the wall clock. I tried distracting myself with a book, then a TV show, but I couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. Finally, I heard the familiar sound of her key in the lock, and relief flooded me. But when she walked in, she barely looked at me, muttering a quick hey as she kicked off her heels and made her way to the bedroom. "Late night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She nodded, already halfway down the hallway. "Yes, sorry. Busy day. Her voice was distant, almost mechanical. I wanted to ask her more, to find out what was keeping her so busy, but something stopped me. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who questioned her every move, the one who seemed clingy or insecure. She worked hard to get to where she was, and I wanted to respect that. But there was an undeniable chill in the air, a growing distance that I could feel in the spaces between us. The next morning, I woke up to find her already dressed, makeup on, hair neatly done, ready to leave for work before the sun was even up. I reached out, catching her hand as she walked past the bed. "Hey," I said, looking up at her. "Are you okay? You've been working so hard lately. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself." She gave me a quick smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine, Jason. Really, just a lot going on right now." With that, she slipped her hand from mine, and before I could say anything else, she was gone. The door closed softly behind her, and I was left in the quiet of our bedroom, wondering if I'd somehow missed something, some sign that she was struggling. But that was Cassandra. She was resilient, focused, and fiercely independent. I convinced myself that it was just another busy phase, a temporary bump in our otherwise perfect life. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern continued. Cassandra would come home later and later. Her messages to me became shorter, less frequent. She'd rush out in the mornings without so much as a goodbye, leaving me staring at the empty side of our bed, wondering where she really was in all this. One Friday night, I decided to surprise her. I made dinner, her favorite, even got a bottle of that wine she loved. I set the table, lit candles, and waited. Hours passed, and the food grew cold. Midnight rolled around, and she still hadn't come home. I checked my phone repeatedly, looking for some sign, a message, anything to explain why she was so late. But there was nothing, just silence. When she finally walked through the door around 1 a.m., she looked exhausted, but alert in a way I couldn't quite place. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, as if surprised that I'd waited up for her. She forced a smile, her gaze flickering to the untouched dinner on the table. "You didn't have to wait," she said, her voice a little too flat, too rehearsed. "I wanted to. Thought maybe we could have a nice evening together," I replied, trying to keep my tone light, though I could feel the tension tightening my words. She dropped her purse on the counter and gave me a quick hug, but her embrace felt hollow, like she was going through the motions. As she pulled away, her eyes avoided mine, fixing on some point just over my shoulder. "It's just been so busy at work," she murmured, running a hand through her hair. "I'm sorry, Jason. Really, I didn't mean to stay this late." I wanted to believe her, but there was something in her face, a flicker of discomfort, that made my stomach twist. I wanted to ask where she'd been, why she hadn't called, but the words stuck in my throat. She looked so tired, almost defeated. I told myself to let it go, that maybe she just needed some space. Let's just eat," I said, forcing a smile. We sat down, but the silence between us was thick, uncomfortable. She picked at her food, barely eating, her mind clearly elsewhere. I tried to fill the silence, talking about my day, sharing stories about work and the funny things that happened. But her responses were brief, barely more than nods or polite smiles. She was present, but she wasn't really there. After a while, I couldn't take it anymore. I set down my fork and looked at her, the words finally spilling out. "Cass, is everything all right? You seem distant. I just want to know if something's going on." She looked up, and for a brief moment, her expression softened. I thought I saw a hint of something, maybe guilt, maybe sadness. But just as quickly, her face turned guarded again. "Jason," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm fine. Really. I just have a lot on my plate right now. Work's been intense, and I don't want you to worry about it." I nodded, swallowing the doubts that kept rising in my mind. "Okay. I'm here for you, right? Whatever you need." She reached out and squeezed my hand, giving me that practice smile again. "I know. Thank you." That was it. The conversation was over, and the silence returned, louder than ever. She finished her meal quickly, muttering about needing to catch up on some work, and disappeared into her office, leaving me alone at the table with a knot of unease I couldn't shake. As I cleared the dishes, a question crept into my mind. When I didn't want to answer? When did my home start to feel like a stranger's? The nights were getting longer, darker. Cassandra came home later than ever, slipping into bed like a ghost. I'd lie awake, pretending to be asleep, catching the faintest whiff of unfamiliar cologne. I tried to ignore it, bury it, but it gnawed at me, relentless. Then came a night it all fell apart. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting. She hadn't come home yet, but I heard the muffled sound of her voice drifting from her home office down the hall. Curiosity pulled me up, and as I got closer, I caught the unmistakable warmth in her tone, soft and unfamiliar. I nudged the door open, and she froze mid-sentence, eyes wide, phone clutched to her ear. She ended the call abruptly, her face a careful mask. "It's late, Cass," I said, voice taut. She shifted, setting her phone down as if nothing was wrong. "Just a work call, Jason." "Midnight work call?" My voice came out harsher than I'd intended. Her gaze flicked down, avoiding mine. "Eric needed input on tomorrow's meeting." At that name, something snapped. I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Are you kidding me, Cass?" My voice cut through the room. "At this hour? How stupid do you think I am?" Her mouth opened, then closed, words failing her for once. She grabbed her phone, moving past me. But I stepped in her way, blocking the door, feeling the weight of every unsaid word, every lie finally coming to a head. "Jason, please," she whispered, trying to push past me. "Please what, Cass?" I asked, my voice cold, unfamiliar even to myself. "Tell me the truth." Her eyes darted around, cornered, a flash of something like fear crossing her face. And then, she whispered, barely audible, "It's complicated." The silence that followed was deafening. I stepped back, letting her leave, the sound of her footsteps echoing down the hall as she vanished into the night. And I was left alone in the darkness, our life unraveling thread by thread. The next morning, Cassandra was gone before dawn. No note, no message, just a cold, empty house and the echo of our confrontation from the night before. I lay there in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The quiet confessions, the words she didn't say. But in the silence, anger bubbled up, sharp and undeniable. I got up and walked into her office, the place that had become her escape over the past few months. Her laptop was on the desk, screen lit, open to her email. I froze. Every instinct told me to walk away, to respect her privacy, to avoid becoming the man who snoops through his wife's things. But that trust, that blind faith I'd had for so long, felt broken beyond repair. She'd asked me to trust her, but I knew those words were empty now. With a shaky breath, I clicked her inbox and typed the name I couldn't escape, Eric. His name popped up everywhere, scattered across her messages like a trail of breadcrumbs. My pulse quickened as I scrolled, opening one email after another. Some were simple, work-related exchanges, innocent enough on the surface. But mixed in were messages that made my stomach twist. Emails late at night, talking about long days and unforgettable nights. Casual jokes, little inside references, like they shared a secret I was never meant to know. My hands trembled as I opened one particular chain. In it, Eric had written, "Last night was perfect. Same time next week?" I scanned down, hoping, praying that her response would shut down whatever fantasy he'd woven in his mind. But her reply was there, as clear as a slap. Looking forward to it. I could use another escape. Escape. That word pierced through me like a knife. It was what we'd once been to each other. An escape, a safe place, a refuge from the world. Now she was sharing that with someone else. Every line I read felt like I was sinking deeper into quicksand. There was even a photo, a candid shot of the two of them at some late-night rooftop bar, his arm casually draped over her shoulders, both of them laughing in the low city light. I didn't recognize the woman in that picture. She looked free, unburdened, happy. I leaned back in the chair, my gaze fixed on the screen, numbness giving way to something darker, something I didn't want to feel. This was more than just an affair. It was a betrayal of everything we'd built together, a dismantling of every moment, every promise we'd made. I shut the laptop, pushing it away from me as if it were poison. My mind was spinning, but one thing was crystal clear. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. All those years, all those dreams we'd built, had vanished in the cold glow of that screen. It was as if our entire life had been reduced to nothing more than an illusion, a hollow story I'd convinced myself was real. Sitting there in her office, surrounded by the remnants of her double life, I realized there was no going back. That evening, I waited. The hours ticked by in silence, the house seeming colder, emptier with every passing minute. I could still feel the weight of the emails, the pictures, each memory of us soured by the lies they now masked. I didn't know what I was going to say, only that I couldn't keep this silent rage bottled up anymore. Tonight, she would come home to a different reality. The truth was out, and she had to face it. Around midnight, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My heart pounded as the door clicked open, and she stepped inside, pausing when she saw me sitting there waiting. Her smile faded, and I could see the unease flicker in her eyes. She knew something was wrong. "Jason," she said, setting her bag down slowly. "Why are you up?" I looked at her, studying her face, the faint traces of makeup still visible, the hint of a perfume I didn't recognize. "We need to talk, Cassandra," I said, my voice low, cold. She hesitated, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What's going on? What's going on?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "I'd like to know that myself. Or maybe you'd rather Eric tell me." The color drained from her face. In that instant, the last bits of doubt vanished. I caught her, and she knew it. But rather than breaking down, apologizing, or even explaining, she just stood there, eyes flashing with something closer to anger than remorse. "What were you doing in my emails?" She shot back, her voice hard. "I was trying to find out why my wife has been lying to me," I replied, my voice shaking. "Why you've been sneaking around, letting me believe everything was fine while you were with him." She looked away, crossing her arms, her stance defiant. "You shouldn't have gone through my things, Jason. Don't turn this on me." I nearly shouted, the words spilling out in a mix of anger and disbelief. "You've been lying to me, Cassandra, hiding things, sneaking around with him. Do you have any idea what that's done to us? To me?" She was silent for a moment, her jaw set. Then, finally, she met my gaze, her expression unreadable. "Maybe you should have seen this coming," she said, her voice cold. "Maybe you should have paid more attention to what was happening between us." Her words hit like a slap, stinging with their casual cruelty. I'd been fighting to hold us together, to hold on to the person I thought she was. And here she was, blaming me, acting as if I'd driven her to this. "So that's it then?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You've already made up your mind?" She hesitated, her face softening, but only for a moment. "Jason, I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know if this is where I belong." I felt something break inside me. This wasn't just a confession, it was a choice. And in that moment, I realized she'd already made it. Cassandra left that night. She gathered a few things quietly, no tears, no apologies, just a few hurried glances as she threw clothes into a bag, avoiding eye contact. I stood in the doorway, feeling a hollowness I'd never known, like I was watching a stranger pack her life away. The finality of it, the emptiness, hit me harder than any of her words. As she walked toward the door, she paused for a moment, looking back as if to say something. But the words never came. She turned away and left, the sound of her footsteps fading until the house was silent, still, and painfully empty. I waited, hoping she'd return, hoping I'd hear her car come back up the driveway, that maybe she'd realize what she was giving up. But the minutes stretched into hours, and all I could hear was the ticking of the clock. The next morning, her absence felt even sharper. Her clothes, her books, little pieces of her life that were woven into every corner of our home. Each one felt like a reminder of something I couldn't quite grasp. I walked from room to room, the memories of our life together playing like scenes from a distant dream. A photograph of us from our first trip together in San Francisco, laughing on a cliff overlooking the Pacific. A collection of postcards she'd started, each one from a city we'd visited, each one now a memento of something I'd lost. Days turned into weeks, and the world outside kept moving, but I was stuck like I was walking through fog. Friends called, asked where Cassandra was, and I'd fumble through answers, saying she was away on business or visiting family. I wasn't ready to tell them, to face the reality of what had happened, of what my life had become. Then one afternoon, I received a letter from her. The envelope was plain, with just her familiar handwriting scrawled across it. I sat down, staring at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside, her words were brief, almost cold. "Jason, I know this isn't what we wanted, but maybe it's what we needed. I hope you'll understand someday. I need to find myself, to figure out who I am outside of everything we built together. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. Maybe one day, we'll both find peace." I put the letter down, feeling the finality of her words wash over me. There was no warmth, no nostalgia, just a sense that I was a chapter she'd closed. In the days that followed, I started to clear out her things, each item feeling like a weight I needed to release. The empty spaces began to fill with a new clarity, a harsh acceptance. It would take time, maybe years, but I was beginning to see that life could go on, that I could rebuild. I had no idea what that life would look like, but it was mine now, untouched, unshared, and entirely my own. In the weeks following Cassandra's departure, my life felt like it was suspended in some strange, quiet limbo. There were no loud confrontations, no dramatic moments, just an empty house, a job that demanded more than I had to give, and a strange, gnawing silence that replaced the rhythm of our lives together. At first, I'd come home each night with a sense of dread, knowing she wouldn't be there. The hollowness was suffocating, and the shadows seemed longer, stretching over everything we'd built together. Memories clung to the walls like echoes, her laughter, the light scent of her favorite perfume lingering faintly in the hallway, even the soft indent in the couch where she always used to sit. I would sit there alone, as if by staying in her spot, I could hold on to some last, vanishing part of her. But slowly, I began to reclaim the spaces. I boxed up the remnants of her life, each item an odd blend of pain and nostalgia. The postcards she'd left from every city we'd visited went into storage. I replaced our framed photos with new ones, images of old friends, family, snapshots from a life that was my own, not ours. Each weekend, I tackled one room at a time, breathing new life into them, shifting things around, making subtle changes. I painted the walls a new color, rearranged the furniture, bought a few plants, small symbols of a life that was mine to rebuild. At first, it felt hollow, like an empty gesture to distract myself, but over time, it felt like progress. My friends started calling more frequently, their voices a lifeline in a sea of solitude. They'd drag me out for drinks, to catch a game, or just to get me out of the house. At first, I resented it, wanted nothing more than to stay hidden. But one night, after a few too many beers and laughter that didn't feel forced, I realized that I was still here, still alive, still capable of connection. One evening, I found myself sitting by the window, looking out over the street, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I was free from the lies, from the lingering doubts, from the shadows of who Cassandra and I used to be. The pain was still there, raw and real, but it no longer controlled me. There was a life beyond the heartbreak, a world that was mine to explore. I wasn't fully healed, and maybe I never would be. But in the quiet moments, I started to feel a flicker of something else. Hope. A future, undefined but possible, stretched out in front of me. I could start fresh, with nothing tying me down, no one holding me back. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. For the first time in a long time, I felt the stirrings of curiosity. Who would I become now, without her? What dreams could I chase? What life could I build? I didn't have all the answers yet. But I knew this. I was ready to find out.